I'm an Austrian economist, and there is a difference between different economists, and the Austrians are pretty much the nemesis of the socialists and the progressives. So I don't know, maybe we'll take a step back, and maybe you've heard of this thing called Christianity, perhaps, right? Maybe a little bit, a skosh. Okay, now you might be familiar that there's several different types of Christianity, several different denominations. So you have your Catholic, your Orthodox, your Baptist, your Methodist, your Presbyterian, and so on and on and on, right? And you can see there's just a whole litany, a whole bunch of them. Well, the same is true when it comes to economics. Now, we don't call them denominations. What we do is we call them schools of thought. And so this is just a list of 9 different schools of thought. And my school of thought, the one that I think is correct or most correct, are the Austrians. Now, the Austrians are not the most popular. The most popular are the neoclassicals. So the neoclassicals are the ones that you hear maybe most about. And if you listen to most of the professors or the people on television, those are the neoclassicals. Now, you also have people that are more progressive, like the developmentalist or the Keynesian. And also we have the Marxists, right? So there's a lot of different types of economics out there. So the Austrian school was founded by Karl Menger, and he was part of this new revolution in economics. It's called the marginalist revolution. And it completely revamped how economics was done. And there were 3 guys that did this at the same time, but his spawned an entire separate school. And you can see from that some other of his followers, Böhm-Bawerk, Wieser, Mises, Hayek. Hayek won the Nobel Prize in economics in '74, Rothbard, and Kirzner. Kirzner's actually still alive. But what I want to do is I want to do a little compare and contrast to show you how the Austrian school is a little bit different. And then after that, we'll talk about the implications and the applications and why this is important. So the first thing is, what is the purpose? What's the difference in the purpose? Why study economics? And if you ask the mainstream, oh, do you know who this guy is? Do you recognize him? That's Milton Friedman, okay. Famous mainstream economist from University of Chicago. He says it's all about prediction. It's all about how well can we forecast into the future. And he says the assumptions aren't really all that important. It's the model and how well it predicts. And so if you're able to put these different things together and they don't make any sense, but it predicts really well, then that's great. In contrast, you have the Austrians. There's a picture of Hayek. It's about understanding. Why does the world work the way it does? And accurate prediction, the Austrians point out, is impossible because we don't have anything that's constant, right? Everything is constantly in flux. So we can never have replication over and over. And you can see this with this bird pattern there, right? It's just this changing pattern. There's a pattern there, but it never repeats. So where do we begin? What's the starting point? Well, the starting point for the mainstream is we got to get data, lots of data, right? All this information. And then once we get all of this data, all these numbers, we're going to stick it into our econometric models and we're going to crunch out solutions. Sounds like fun, right? But that's what most economists do. So if you go to NC State, that's what the vast majority of their economics department does. They hired me to teach classes on capitalism, and I did that for 8 years because they didn't have anyone who could do that. They were all just wrapped in their data and their econometric models because they're about prediction. But the Austrians, on the other hand, they start with an axiom. Now let me ask you this, what's an axiom? Go ahead.
It's like a self-evident truth. Like
yes.
You can't disagree. It just kind of is what it is.
Exactly. It's a truth. It's something that is true always true, and cannot be falsified. And we begin in Austrian economics with the human action axiom that says people behave purposefully. Now, all the time? Mm-mm. But when we're confronted with scarcity and we have to make a choice, I don't just randomly pick things, it's purposeful. And because of that, we're able to understand what's going on in the economy. And of course, the second assumption is this, that we live in a world of scarcity. So I have to make a choice. So how do we then approach economics? What's our method? Well, the mainstream, it's all about representative agents. They just kind of think of a person. Now, when I think representative agents, I kind of think of these guys, right? They're all the same, aren't they? Well, almost the same. And then they think about totals and aggregates, right? Where they're just looking at the big picture all the time. In contrast, the Austrians, their method is, let's begin with individuals. We're all unique. Look around the room, right? And we're all different. But maybe you have siblings at home. Now, you were raised by the same parents, but are you the same as your brother or your sister? What if you're twins? Have you seen like identical twins? Of course, they're the same, right? Not even. We're all unique. And then we start with that individual and with our human action axiom and our assumption of scarcity, and we engage in logical deduction. So if I start with a truth, let's say 4x plus 1 equals 17. Suppose that that's true. Then what can I say? 4x equals 16. Now, is that true? It is, right? As long as I continue my logic, and then if I say x equals 4, well, is that true? And so if I start with the truth, and as long as I don't make a mistake, what can I say about my conclusion? It's also going to be true. So unlike the mainstream where I'm trying to gather data and trying to sort it all out, because that's impossible, it's too much, what I do is I start with the truth, and I end up with a model that I know is true, and then I apply that model to the world outside, because the world is so chaotic. But then I can understand why things fit together the way they do. And so the Austrian approach, I think, is superior in this regard. So the process. So if you have a representative agent, if you have clones, then I have perfect knowledge, because all I have to do is just what that one guy is going to do. I can survey the whole chessboard at one time, and I can just move pieces around. There's no time. And this is important because what they use is called comparative statics. So we have one point, and then we move the demand curve in this one. Now we jump to the next point. That's not how it actually works in the real world. In the real world, as the demand curve slides, we see that there is a temporary shortage, and that people are bidding against each other. Buyers compete with buyers. They bid up the price. The manager is noticing that inventories are running low. He's calling up the wholesaler, said, send me some more. And we eventually equilibrate. You see, it's really a step-by-step process. This occurs, then this occurs, then that leads to this. And it's that sort of step-by-step thinking which makes you better problem solvers. And if you're a better problem solver, that means when you get a job, it means more cha-ching, right? Yeah, that's what we want. And then we also have to recognize that we have incomplete knowledge, that this knowledge is dispersed. I don't know anything about you guys. You don't know very much about me. But when we go into the marketplace, how much ice cream should they produce? How much chocolate ice cream should we produce? How much strawberry? How much vanilla? How much, and on and on and on. Nobody knows all of this. The real problem is, how do I take these little bits of knowledge, these bits of information that are packed in everyone's heads, all dispersed throughout the economy, and coordinate it? how do I do that? So what are the implications? What are the applications? Well, let's take one of my favorite subjects, money, right? I like money. I study money. I don't have much money, but I like it, right? If you have extra money, just feel free to give it to me. I don't mind. I'm not that proud. I won't say no. I'm like, no, that's okay. No, I'll take it. So the Austrians, they say that money evolves from the market. We start with barter. We have person A with apples, person B with blueberries. And if they want what each other has, they're going to trade. But what if the guy with blueberries doesn't want apples? What does he have to do? What does A with apples have to do? He says, well, I'm going to find something that he does like. So he finds person C. And person C, of course, has... Oranges doesn't start with C. We got apples A, blueberries B, C, oranges? No! That's just crazy talk. No, the correct answer is cherries, yes. So you know. Now when we do this, cherries then becomes the money. Cherries takes on not just having use value, but also exchange value. And cherries then become the money in that example. And we see that lots of different things can be money, but some things are better at being money than others. So having 2 halves of an ounce of silver, right, versus 1 ounce of silver is better than having 2 halves of a horse than a whole horse, right? I mean, having 2 halves of a horse is not the same as a whole horse. You get this, right? It's not, just trust me on this one. Not so good, okay? So some things are better at being money, gold and silver and precious metals. In the mainstream, they say, well, yeah, money exists, but we don't really care where it comes from. We don't really use it. It's just a numeraire. The Austrians say that the same economic rules of supply and demand affect money, that it's just another commodity and that we can study it. The mainstream says that, well, money times velocity equals P times Q, which is, of course, nominal GDP. Where did that come from? Well, it's an identity. Nominal GDP equals nominal GDP, and we will start from there. So what's money? Well, it's the M. Where did it come from? You see the problem. The Austrians argue that money is not neutral, that the effects of it being not neutral is because it's injected into the market at specific points. And this causes some people to win and some people to lose. So, suppose my new best friend over here, who also graduated from Hillsdale College, suppose I'm the central bank and I just type into existence a new $100 billion. You're welcome. Now, Zach, what do you do with that $100 billion? Interesting. What else?
On the bank?
No, you're you.
Oh, on me?
Yeah, you're you. Who else will you be?
Oh, I was going to buy a house.
He's going to buy a house and
Private jet. A car.
a car. $100 billion. You're buying one house and one car. And maybe a jet. Yeah, you guys are better spenders than him. Okay, so he's set up a trust fund. There we go. All right, so he's spending money, and the money is now coming over here, and he's spending it with you guys. Now you guys have the new money, and what are you buying?
A private jet.
Private jet, jet ski, nice, sensible things, right? Put it all on black. You know it's not going to work. So, as the money then starts to spread through the economy, think of it like honey being poured onto a plate, and it kind of oozes along. Prices are going up. Now, did you get the new money yet? No. But prices are going up. What's happening to your real wealth? It's going down. You're losing. The people who get the new money first win. The people who get the new money last lose. who gets the new money first in our economy? Well, the Fed prints it, so they obviously have it first. They then do what? They give it to investment banks, Wall Street, and they're buying U.S. Treasuries, government, and then government gives grants to NGOs, non-governmental organizations. And so, of course, Washington and New York are really, really happy about it because they're the ones winning at your expense in particular. The people who get the money last. Like poor little teachers from the University of Mount Olive. Us. In the mainstream, they say that money is neutral. If I add money into the economy, it just affects prices. No harm, no foul, no problem. When we look at markets, we look at the difference between the Austrians and the mainstream. And the Austrians say that the market is a process. The mainstream says that markets are always to be assumed in equilibrium. Now, you guys have seen supply and demand curves, hopefully. And that X marks the spot is what? I know, they're kids, they're adorable, get over it. So, when we have the demand curve move, we go from equilibrium to equilibrium. These comparative static models are equilibrium always models. But in the real world, what moves the demand curve? Tastes and preferences. What moves the supply curve? Expectations. How often do we change tastes and preferences and expectations? All the time. How often do you change your mind? All the time. That means the supply curve and the demand curve are moving all the time. How often are we actually going to be in equilibrium? Practically never. And even if we are, then someone changes their mind and it moves. So why do we have an equilibrium always model in an equilibrium never world? The market is a process. We're never in equilibrium. Now they say, well, markets are automatic. You just solve the equations. You just crunch out the equilibrium conditions. The Austrians say that entrepreneurs are critical to move us towards equilibrium. By searching for profit, the unintended consequence is moving us to equilibrium. The mainstream says entrepreneurs and money are not important in our economic models. In fact, we don't even put them in. The Austrians say that buyers and sellers cooperate with each other. Buyers compete with buyers, sellers compete with sellers. But buyers and sellers don't compete with each other. Buyers and sellers cooperate. But the mainstream, they have a model called the model of perfect competition. And if you had to diagram that sentence, we use the model of perfect competition. What's the word competition in that sentence? It's a noun. It's a state of being. In the real world, competition is a vigorous process. We play the game because we don't know who's going to win. In terms of economic calculation, the Austrians say that to allocate capital and intermediate goods efficiently, we need to know these relative scarcity conditions. Where do we get this knowledge? The only source of this knowledge is the market. And only when there's private property can the market generate relative prices which contain this knowledge. In contrast to this, the mainstream says once we've specified all the variables, it's just about number crunching, about plugging it into our equations and crunching it out. In fact, we can use supercomputers. And as supercomputers get better and better, we're going to be able to centrally plan the economy. And if we can centrally plan the economy, there's no need for private property rights. You don't need to own anything. Welfare analysis. Now, when we say welfare in economics, we mean like happiness. How good is the society? Not like handing out money to people. So the Austrians say that interventionism, where the government is actively changing things in the economy, distorts relative prices. These distortions create false information. That false information then, do you think that's going to help things? No, it moves us away from efficiency. And so interventionism makes total welfare worse Society is worse off, although some small groups are going to benefit at the expense of everyone else. In contrast, we look at the mainstream, and they say that markets do not always generate the best results. We have market imperfections. Government then is necessary to intervene. Well, how are they going to intervene? We're going to use experts. How good are experts? And these experts are necessary to correct the market imperfections, to correct the market failures. And we assume, of course, that government officials are saintly and omniscient. What about business cycles? The Austrians say that business cycles have a definite cause, which is an expansion of the money supply. That then lowers interest rates and transmits false information to entrepreneurs. These false signals then encourage them falsely. That creates an artificial boom. That artificial boom cannot last and will result in a recession. And that recession is going to be painful. It's necessary, but painful. In the mainstream, there are no cycles. There's just economic shocks. They're just exogenous. They just come from outside. These shocks can be positive or negative. How much of a theory is that? Well, from outside of the model, something's going to happen and it's going to take us by surprise. Does that sound like a theory? No. And then they're unpredictable. So the best thing we can do is just manage the economy to meet these challenges. Now, only if somebody would have written a nice little clear book about how to deal with Austrian business cycle theory in a way that they could promote it to students, maybe at Thales Academy for $8, at Mises.org. Oh, moving on. Yeah, nice. It's free, actually, as PDF, and the PowerPoint, also free. You weren't fooling anyone by crouching that 3 centimeters there. Just so you know.
Maybe I was fooling the camera.
Maybe. Okay. So what then is the nemesis of the progressives? It's the Austrians. So what are the progressives? Well, they want to intervene in the economy. And so interventionism then says at the base, the foundation is a market structure. However, governmental authorities need to step in to correct, override market signals, do a better job than all of us collectively. These orders change the signals that the consumers generate, and these changes alter the market, and here's the key, causing secondary consequences, secondary effects. You see, these secondary effects generate new problems. One solution would be to repeal the initial intervention. But that rarely ever happens. So let's suppose that the price of milk is $4 a gallon. Okay? $4 a gallon. Now, I care about children. I don't know about you guys, but I care about children. And children, little children, like the cute ones we saw walking by, they need milk. It does their body good. Strong bones, strong teeth, a nice shiny coat. No, that's dogs. But still, you get the idea. Milk does a body good. And so what I want to do is I want to help them out and put a price control for milk at $1 a gallon. Wouldn't that be a great idea? What do you think? Would that be a great idea? No. Do you hate children? Why do you hate children? You child-hating, hate-monger, child-hating hater. I can't believe we allow people like this graduate from Hillsdale. Oh, my word. I don't care what the hater is going to say. I'm going to pass that law to lower the price of milk to children because I care. Now, what happens? What happens when I get my way and I pass my $1 maximum price? Go.
If it takes more than $1 to produce milk,
Yep.
companies are going to stop producing milk.
Right.
And the reason they were selling it at $4 is assuming that there's enough business to make sure that there's enough competition so you don't set milk at whatever you want. they're
Right.
just going to stop. It presumably takes more than $1 to make it. Otherwise, they'd lower it further to bring in new customers.
Right. So we cut back on milk production, but how many more people are going to want milk for $1? A lot more. And so what do we end up with if quantity supplied is less than quantity demanded? Starts with an S, rhymes with the word ortage. Yeah, shortage. You guys are so smart. So we have a shortage of milk. Now you could have a politician say, well, I'm sorry, my bad, I didn't really mean to do that. Let's go ahead and repeal my dumb law from last year, right? Do we ever hear a politician say that? Never. What do they say? They say, well, let's go to the dairy farmer and see what his problem is. It's like, dude, you cut back your milk production. Why? And he says, I can't produce more because the cost of feed is so high. I got a solution for it. What am I going to do? Price control feed. And then what happens? We have a shortage in feed. And then I go to the people who grow the feed for the cows. And I say, why did you cut back? And they say, well, my costs are too high. And I go, aha, I can help with that. So I price control fertilizer, price control pesticides, price control seeds. And now what do we see? Venezuela. We see Venezuela, yes. We have more and more intervention. What we see is that the interventionist system is always shifting. It's always changing. But it's always changing in one direction, or almost always changing in one direction. It's not stable. The middle-of-the-road policy doesn't stay in the middle of the road. It's like taking Jell-O and nailing it to the wall, and then it goes, right, just like that. So what are the progressives progressing toward? Right? I mean, if you're a progressive, think of the word. You're progressing. That means you're going towards something. What are you going towards? More and more regulation, more and more state planning, which is what? Central planning. Socialism. Now, you're going to hear some things. The communism is on the left. Okay. But the Nazis, they're on the right. And that's just completely false. Nazi is a contraction of two words. National Socialist. So the communists, the Soviet Union, were international socialists. The Nazis in Germany were the national socialists. They're both socialists. They're both on the left. In the American political system, we have a right and the left. But that does not match European right and left. So even if they're right in Europe, saying, oh, well, the Nazis are on the right and the commies are on the left, in the American system, on the right is smaller government. On the right is individual freedom, a strengthening of private property rights, free markets. So if progressives, they want the same thing as the communists. They just don't want to throw the bombs and start a violent revolution. They had a mascot, the turtle. And what was that? You know, it moves really slow. And the motto is, when I bite hard. And they realized it was going to take 100 years to get to socialism. So why aren't we there yet? Right? Why aren't we there yet? Well, the answer is because some people have the knowledge and have the courage to fight. That's why. And they stand up against it and say, no, we need to go another way. So what are the empirical results of central planning? It's over 100 million innocent deaths. This is Ukraine. This is Cambodia. We have poverty and hunger. This is Kharkiv. This is from the Black Book of Communism, written by some French guys. I'm just going to read this. It says, to collectivize the land and the great assault on the peasantry, Stalin used starvation as a weapon, particularly against the Ukrainians. This policy resulted in the death of roughly 6 million people, including 4 million in the Ukraine. This was in a year and a half, by the way. Here in Kharkiv in 1933, the peasants became indifferent to the daily phenomenon of death. Right? They're just walking past the dead bodies. Now, get this last line here. Cannibalism, what? Cannibalism was so widespread that government printed posters that said, quote, eating your children is an act of barbarism. How bad does it have to be when the government has to remind people that? Venezuela, Cuba. Then you have fear and spying on neighbors, the KGB, the Stasi. Loyalty to an impersonal party. The party always comes first. You dare not question them. And this is the Berlin Wall. There's no freedom to leave. Let me ask you this. Which way were the guns pointed in the Berlin Wall? They were pointed toward their own people. Free markets are the only alternative. You might say, well, I can see how the free market might generate more wealth and doesn't lead to all this stuff, but come on, can free markets be all that great? Well, are free markets fundamentally moral? Are they good? So what are the conditions for trade? Just a regular free market. What do we need? We need private property rights. That means I get say. Right? If you own something, that means I determine who gets to use my car. I determine who gets to use my computer. I determine because I own it. No one else can tell me. Do you know how much individual autonomy that is? Because what's the most important property right you own? You. You own you. Now, if I want something, I can't just take a big stick and clunk you on the head and take your stuff. There's no coercion in a free market. I have to persuade you, no matter how much smarter I am and all these things, right? So if I'm a baker and I look at you guys and I'm like, you know what, I know what you need. You need potassium. And you also need brain food, so like omega-3 fatty acids. So I'm going to make some muffins with those things. So potassium has, of course, bananas, right? And omega-3 fatty acids, salmon. So I'm going to make salmon banana muffins. You're welcome. You going to buy those? No. Do you have fancy letters after your name like I do? You do not. Have you been to culinary school? No. I know, so therefore now you have to eat them. You're welcome. Now you're going to eat them? No. What do I have to do? I have to serve. I have to say, what do you want? What do you want? Oh, you don't want the banana salmon muffins. You want chocolate muffins or cinnamon muffins. I have to cater to you in order to get the money. You see, money, dollars are like certificates of service. Imagine I go to a pizzeria and I say, I would like a pizza, right? And he says, have you served your fellow man? Well, have you? Suppose I go to your house and I cut your grass and you give me $20. When I go to the pizzeria and he asks if I served my neighbor, I can hold up the $20 and say, there's evidence. There's a certificate of service. I've served my fellow man. I have served my neighbor. And a market takes greed and self-interest because I want money, I want profit. But I can't just be coming down from on high and say, you know, you're going to have to eat my salmon banana muffins. I have to be humble. And I have to then channel that greed and that self-interest into things that serve you. So yeah, markets are moral because profits are the result of listening to the consumer. If you don't listen to the consumer, what do you have? If you look at the sign of McDonald's, it doesn't say, ha ha, sucker ripped you off. It says what? Billions and billions served. To become rich, you have to do what? You have to follow the wishes of the consumers. And the entrepreneurs have to humble themselves and say, what do you want? I have to put myself in your shoes. And this is so very, very different than the pre-capitalistic age where you have lords and kings and queens. And they had peasants. Did they have to ask the peasants, what do you want? How do you want your life? No. They were born here in a caste, and everyone else was born here in that caste. And that was it. And what's been the result of all of this? What's been the result of all of this? Well, let's take a look. So, longer than you've been alive, but not by much, 2001. GDP per person, after we adjust for inflation and such, what do we see? A 52% increase in GDP per person in the world. Infant mortality rates, babies dying. What do we see? A 43% decline. New lives being able to experience life. Live past 3. Life expectancy is 7.3% increase. We're living longer. And extreme poverty? Extreme poverty is $1.90 a day, adjusted for inflation and for percentage of the population. What do we see? We see a 55% decline in extreme poverty. Yes?
Aren't these graphs recorded in a time we've had government intervention in the economy?
Yes. But what we see is that a lot of these nations throughout the world have opened themselves up to markets, in particular China and India. And so before, like India was a huge socialist country until they got rid of the license Raj in 1991. We see that China did not really open itself up until markets it began in the late 70s, but it didn't really blossom until the 90s. And what we see then are the fruits of international trade and business and commerce. And so let me ask you this. What United Nations program fixed all of this? Which NGOs promoted this? Right? All of this happened very quietly, without fanfare, without the Clinton Foundation, none of that, right? All of this was what? Due to commerce. And so when I say that free markets are not just the only alternative, I also mean that they're the best alternative. Okay. Thank you very much.